This is such an exciting video because it's pretty rare that we have 3 new phones like this that really do go head to head. So I've got the new Google Pixel 5 with me here, along with the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, that's the fan edition, and the all-new OnePlus 8T, and these all cost around £600 or $700, give or take. And if you do find this video useful, then a little like or subscribe down there would be amazing. I'm also like this close to 1 million subscribers, so if you can help get me there quicker before Christmas, that would be incredible. Alright, so let's jump straight in, and side by side you can see the Pixel 5 is quite a bit smaller than the Samsung and the OnePlus. So if you are after a smaller, more compact phone, then the Pixel 5 is the way to go. But which one do you think looks best? I must admit the Pixel's sort of sage color is growing on me, but it has a kind of papery, recycled cardboard texture to it, although underneath it is aluminium. Now the S20 FE actually looks and feels a lot like the Note 20, with what Samsung calls this glastic body, which is just a fancy plastic really. I think it looks pretty good, although this cloud navy color is definitely one of the less interesting flavors you can get it in. And finally, the OnePlus 8T looks a lot like the Nord, albeit with a beefier camera setup. And it's the only glossy finish of the 3. But which looks best is all down to you really, it's very subjective. If I had to pick my favorite, they're all kind of different, I reckon I will go with the FE, and probably in the red color. There's not a curved screen in sight though, they all have flat screens, which I know a lot of you guys do prefer. Now you'll notice all 3 phones do have fingerprint readers, but while the OnePlus and the Samsung use optical in-screen readers, the Pixel goes for a physical one on the back, which I must say I do find slightly more convenient. Weirdly though, there isn't actually any face unlock option with the Pixel, which I guess isn't the end of the world because you can just use your finger to unlock it, but I do tend to use face unlocking quite a bit, although I get these days with everyone wearing masks all the time it's less helpful, but it just seems like a weird omission. We also get stereo speakers on all 3 phones, but while I'd say the OnePlus and the Samsung are pretty much neck and neck quality-wise, the Pixel does fall down a bit in terms of quality, and also the fact that the bottom-firing speaker is quite a bit louder than the under-screen earpiece speaker at the top. So when you're watching movies or videos, the sound is a little bit one-sided. If you're after a headphone jack though, unfortunately none of these phones have one. Now in terms of water resistance, both the S20 FE and the Pixel 5 give you full IP68 water resistance, which means if you wanted to, you could take them in up to 1.5 meters of water for half an hour. However, unfortunately the 8T offers no official IP rating. OnePlus say it's still reasonably water resistant though, and splash proof, but yeah, I probably wouldn't take this swimming with me. And finally, before we get to the fun stuff, in terms of connectivity, all 3 of these phones are 5G, although the base model of the S20 FE is actually 4G, which is £100 cheaper, but then you also get the slightly rubbish Exynos chip instead of the Snapdragon. It really is hard holding 3 phones at the same time. I'm completely failing here. I was trying to show off the screens because now I want to talk about the displays on all 3 of the phones. I'm not going to do that because I'll just break it. But the point is, in terms of screen quality, I think the Pixel 5 does fall behind the other 2 a little bit. Because while technically it is the sharpest, as they're all Full HD+, but the smallest screen size means we get the highest pixel per inch density, what you will notice though is the refresh rate. Both the Samsung and the OnePlus are 120Hz, which also comes with 240Hz touch sampling, whereas the Pixel is just 90Hz. So for gaming in particular, the Pixel probably isn't the best option. So design, well, subjective. Screen quality, probably a tie between the S20 and the OnePlus. But now let's talk about performance. Which one of these phones is the fastest? Well, in terms of raw processor power, the S20 FE just about takes the win, although it's pretty neck and neck with the OnePlus. But sadly, as you can see, the Pixel is really lagging behind. And then finally in 3D Mark, running the Slingshot benchmark, and even just watching the test run, you can see the difference. The Pixel is nowhere near as smooth. And the results paint a pretty clear picture. The Pixel's Snapdragon 765G chip just can't keep up. I must admit, it is a little bit disappointing to see that kind of performance from the Pixel 5 because while I do appreciate Google sort of changing track a little bit and giving us a more affordable flagship phone, which they have, but maybe they kind of forgot about or didn't realize that the competition was getting better as well. I mean, for similar money with these 2 phones, we're getting the flagship Snapdragon 865, which is a lot faster. So They've obviously compromised on the processor, the chip, to make this more affordable, but then for the same price we're getting it in these phones, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It is interesting though that even though this top spec model of the OnePlus 8T, this is the one with 12 gigs of RAM, so actually it's got double the RAM of this UK version of the FE, we're only seeing sort of 1 to 2% difference in those benchmark tests. So in reality, well, if you're a super enthusiast multitasker, then maybe it will come in handy, and I guess to some extent it makes it more future-proof, but really it shows that that RAM difference, well, doesn't make much of a difference at all, really. Now the good news is that all three phones can comfortably play the latest games, but the extra performance with the Samsung and the OnePlus means you get better graphics settings and higher frame rates, which is important if you want to take full advantage of that 120Hz screen, although of course the game will also need to support 120. After playing some games for a while on these phones, I did notice the Pixel got quite hot. I recorded 41 degrees Celsius on the back versus just 31 on the 8T and 35 on the S20. So the OnePlus is the coolest and the Pixel is the hottest. The thing is though, the hardware and the raw performance is only really half the story. When it comes to software, well, I think this is where the Pixel could sort of claw itself back a little bit. Because we get pure stock Android 11, and while it's not the fastest phone in the world, it's actually really responsive and smooth to use. I didn't notice any slowdowns at all. Plus with the Pixel, you'll be the first to get new updates, which is a pretty big selling point by itself. But for me, I think my favorite phone to use is the OnePlus 8T because we get Android 11 out of the box, and also this runs OnePlus's own Oxygen OS 11 software, which actually is one of the biggest sort of revamps to the sort of UI and the design in quite a long time. It actually feels a little bit more like a Samsung phone. But as always with OnePlus, it's still incredibly fast, and it's kind of like a good halfway house between the stock Android of the Pixel and the slightly heavier One UI on the Samsung. The S20 FE is still very fast though, but Samsung's software updates always lag behind, so we're still on Android 10 here. So in summary, the Pixel 5 is lovely to use. We also get updates first, but it is significantly less powerful. The S20 FE has great performance, but the software perhaps isn't the slickest, and also it's the last to get updates. And I think the OnePlus 8T is kind of like a happy medium. It's fast, it's pretty quick to get updates, and it's kind of like stock Android, but with a few extras that are actually quite useful. Now, before we get to the all-important camera test, let's talk about battery life. Which one of these lasts the longest? Well, I ran a pretty intensive battery rundown test. I matched the brightness and the settings on all three. I went through hours of YouTube, Instagram, gaming, and 4K video recording. This test alone took me all day. But by the end, we have a clear winner and a clear loser. And so as the Pixel 5 finally gives up after 9.5 hours into the test, the S20 FE still has 12% of its battery left, and the OnePlus a whopping 20% remaining. So best battery life goes to the 8T, and as well as that, we also get the fastest charging with this guy. There aren't actually a ton of upgrades with the 8T over the 8 from about 6 months ago. The big two are the fact that we get 120Hz over 90Hz, and also now much faster charging. We get 65 watt warp charge. And unlike some other manufacturers, we get the fast charger bundled in the box. You don't have to pay extra. The only downside though of the OnePlus is you don't get wireless charging or reverse charging, something both the Pixel and the S20 do support. Now to be fair, the Pixel does have the smallest battery. It's 4080 mAh versus 4500 on both the OnePlus and the Samsung, but then again, this does have the smaller screen, the least powerful processor and hardware inside. It's also 90Hz, not 120. Yeah, not the best performance, although thinking back to my Pixel 4 review from last year, the battery was also not great with that at the start, but then over time, after a month or two of use, it actually got quite a lot better, like an extra 20% or so. So while I expect all three phones to improve with time, I did notice the Pixel especially getting better as I used it. And finally, which phone has the best camera? Well, let me show you a few pictures side by side, and starting with the main lens, then switching to the ultra-wide. All three phones do have a proper ultra-wide camera, which is great to see. And then finally switching to a zoom, unfortunately the Pixel doesn't have a dedicated telephoto lens, so this is a 2x digital zoom, versus 3x optical on the S20 and 2x optical on the OnePlus. Now if I run through the lenses again and then zoom in as far as they can go, you can see a pretty big difference. So the S20 FE is the clear winner when it comes to zooming, followed by the Pixel, surprisingly, despite not even having a telephoto lens. Now in terms of actual picture quality, in good light they all take fantastic photos. But there is a pattern, with the S20 giving us more vivid, slightly oversaturated colors, par for the course really with the Samsung, whereas the OnePlus has a good natural tone but can be a little too contrasty, sometimes giving us a darker look. But in my opinion, I think the Pixel 5 is the most natural and accurate overall. Switching to portrait mode, and these were all taken from the same point, but by default the Samsung and the OnePlus use the ultra-wide lens for portraits, although you can switch to the main lens if you prefer. So the sun is really beating down on Sarah in this shot, but you can see the Pixel does the best job at sort of evening out the highlights on her skin and also her jacket. The Samsung is the most punchy, aka Instagram ready, but a little bit unnatural looking. And the OnePlus is not my favorite. It's the least detailed, and again the shadows and the contrast are just a bit too dark. Moving on to some lower light tests, and wow, what's going on with the OnePlus here? The white balance is just completely off and it's got a yellowy hue to it. Both the Pixel and the Samsung do a pretty good job here though. Next up, and we've got our first night mode shot. The Pixel 5 does really well here, managing to keep the color of the leaves pretty close to their natural white. The S20 FE is also pretty good, although you can see, despite me focusing on the plant, that it's dimmed the candles in the background more than brightening up the foreground. But it's sharp and it looks good. The OnePlus, well again, the colors are just way off, although to its credit the plant pot is a little bit brighter and more detailed. Another nice shot here of my desk setup, and actually the OnePlus does much better here. Perhaps it's just the warmer hues it struggles with, but still I think the Pixel is the clear winner. It's the most detailed and color accurate. It is good to see though that all three phones support night mode with their ultra-wide camera as well. And actually the quality and the colors are pretty similar to the main lens, which is good. Now leaving all that crazy RGB for a second, and outside with night mode, I think again the Pixel takes the win. Now switching things around to the selfie camera, and I must admit I look pretty unwell in all of these, maybe it's just the lighting, but I must say I really do like the OnePlus here. All beauty modes are turned off on all three phones, but the Samsung is just far too soft and a little washed out, and the Pixel has a slightly unnatural purple hue to it. As for low light selfies, well, the OnePlus is actually the only phone not to give you a night mode for the front camera, which can let it down sometimes. It's bright, but by far the least detailed and a bit washed out. The S20 is sharp, but just a bit too dark, while I think the Pixel does pretty well overall, but we still have some of those sort of purpley hues. And finally, one super dark selfie outside, again with night mode, except on the OnePlus, sadly. But what about video quality? Well, I'm shooting this at 4K 30 on all three phones, although the Samsung and the OnePlus do actually top out at 4K 60, although you can't on the Pixel. But hopefully this will give you a bit of an idea of the video quality. We've also got this very bright sunlight, some sort of darker contrasty areas there, so we should be able to get a bit of an idea of the dynamic range. Now what we can also do is change the lenses. So this is with the main one, but then if we jump to the ultra-wide on all three, you can see the Samsung is a little bit wider with a 0.5 times ultra-wide, whereas the other two are 0.6 times. And then if we jump to the telephoto lens, well, at least the zoom, because the Pixel doesn't actually have a proper telephoto, although its digital zoom is actually quite good. So we've got 2 times on the Pixel, the 3 times optical on the Samsung, and the 2 times optical on the OnePlus. Now if we go for a bit of a walk, you can get an idea of the stabilization. This is still with the zoom lens, but then if we jump back to the main one, I'm also switching between the microphones on all three phones throughout, the little speaker icon switching so you can see which phone's recording the audio. And then finally to the ultra-wide. Now all three phones deserve a full review by themselves. I can't cover every single feature of the phone in this video because, well, we'd be here all day, but hopefully by this point you've got a better idea of which phone is probably best for you. I've been going back and forth on which is my favorite throughout this whole video. I don't think there is one clear winner. It all kind of comes down to what's important to you. I think if you're a gamer, then maybe, don't go for the Pixel 5, but if you want the best camera, then the S20 and the Pixel are kind of like your best bets. If I had to use one as my daily driver, as the YouTuber cliche goes, I would probably go with the S20 FE. It feels like, as I say, the best all-rounder. It does everything quite well. But what about you? Which one would you go for? The Pixel, the OnePlus, or the S20 FE? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I know this was a long one, but I hope you found this video helpful. And if you do want to see more from me, I've got loads more videos coming soon. It is Techtober after all. Then make sure you do hit that little subscribe button down below. Help me get to that 1 million subscriber mark. And I'll catch you next time right here on the Tech Chat.